I was sitting in my car after Thanksgiving dinner, my hands still trembling from what I had just overheard. Through the kitchen window, I could see my family laughing and raising their glasses in a toast. My Aunt Gloria's voice still echoed in my ears. "You'll always be a worthless nobody, that girl." The irony was almost too much to bear. Just yesterday, I had quietly transferred $800 to cover her rent the same way I had been doing for months without her knowing. Before I tell you how I made them realize exactly what a worthless nobody can do, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from and hit that like button if you have ever been underestimated by the people who should believe in you most. Subscribe because what I did next will change everything they thought they knew about me. Let me start from the beginning so you understand exactly how twisted this situation really was. My name is Denise, and at 32 years old, I work as a remote software developer with an annual salary of $90,000. You would think that would be something to celebrate, right? Well, my family had no idea about my success because I chose to live modestly. I rented a small studio apartment for $1,200 a month, drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic that I had paid off years ago, and shopped at thrift stores for most of my clothes. From the outside, it probably looked like I was barely scraping by, but the truth was that I was building a substantial savings account while secretly supporting my entire family. My mother, Carol, was 58 and worked part-time at a department store. As a single mom who had raised my brother and me alone, she struggled to make ends meet on her minimal income. Every month, I anonymously paid her $800 rent by telling her landlord it was a gift from her church. She never questioned it because she desperately needed the help, and I made sure the story was believable by occasionally mentioning the generous congregation during our phone calls. My younger brother Tommy was 29, unemployed for 8 months, and had 2 young children with his wife Sarah, who had never held a steady job. Their monthly utility bills averaged $300, which I paid directly to the electric and gas companies using a fake business name. They thought some kind of government assistance program was covering their costs, and I never corrected that assumption. Then there was my Aunt Gloria, my mother's 52-year-old sister, who worked as a hairdresser but had a chronic spending problem. Her $400 car payment was mysteriously covered each month by what she believed was an anonymous benefactor who had seen her struggling. In reality, it was me making online payments from a fake account I had set up specifically for this purpose. My Uncle Pete, Gloria's ex-husband, who remained close to our family, owned a failing auto shop that was drowning in debt. Every month, I covered his $600 business loan payment through what he thought was a mysterious investor interested in keeping local businesses afloat. He spent countless hours wondering who his guardian angel could be, never suspecting it was his broke niece. Finally, there was my cousin Amanda Gloria's 26-year-old daughter, who had recently graduated college with massive student loan debt. I paid $500 monthly toward her loans, while she believed it was some kind of continuation scholarship that the financial aid office had arranged. She never looked too closely at the details because she was just grateful for the help. In total, I was secretly providing $2,600 every month to my family members, which added up to over $31,000 annually. I had developed elaborate cover stories for each payment, carefully researched their financial situations, and set up automatic transfers to avoid any suspicion. The ironic part was that while I was literally keeping them afloat financially, they all assumed I was the family failure. During family gatherings, they would make subtle comments about poor Denise and how I was trying so hard but just could not seem to get ahead. They pitied me for my thrift store clothes and old car, never realizing that I could afford much better, but chose to prioritize helping them over material possessions. They never once offered to help me or even asked if I needed anything because they assumed I was too proud to accept charity from people who were supposedly doing better than me. The warning signs of their disrespect had been building for months. They expected me to always bring the cheapest dishes to family potlucks, while they showed up with expensive wine and elaborate desserts. They never invited me to costly family outings like concerts or nice restaurants, assuming I could not afford the expense. Most hurtfully, they often talked about me in the third person, even when I was sitting right there, as if my financial struggles made me somehow invisible or insignificant. Thanksgiving dinner was hosted at Tommy and Sarah's house, the same house whose rent I had been secretly paying for months. I arrived with a pan of homemade cornbread, a simple but delicious contribution that I knew would feed everyone without breaking what they assumed was my tight budget. The other family members had brought expensive wine gourmet side dishes and designer desserts, all of which they presented with great fanfare while barely acknowledging my humble offering. As we sat around the table, the subtle digs began almost immediately. Sarah commented on how I always brought such practical dishes with a tone that made it clear she found my contributions lacking. Amanda mentioned how she wished she could live as simply as I did with no stress about money, completely unaware that I was the reason she had no stress about her student loans. Gloria kept insisting I looked thin and worried that financial stress was affecting my health, all while wearing a new outfit that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. The most painful part was how genuine their concerns seemed to be. They really believed they were being kind and supportive, but their words felt like tiny cuts that accumulated throughout the evening. I smiled and played along with their assumptions, partly because I did not want to embarrass them, and partly because I had grown so accustomed to being underestimated that it felt normal. After dinner, I went to the coat closet to get my jacket, planning to say my goodbyes and head home to the quiet sanctuary of my studio apartment. That was when I heard their voices coming from the kitchen, and something made me pause to listen instead of announcing my departure. Gloria's voice was the clearest. "That poor girl will never amount to anything. She tries so hard, but some people just are not built for success." Tommy chimed in with what sounded like genuine sympathy. "I feel bad for her sometimes, still living like a college student at 32. It has got to be hard watching everyone else move forward while she stays stuck." But it was my mother's voice that cut the deepest. "She tries so hard, bless her heart, but some people just are not meant for financial success. She is smart enough, but she does not have that drive that it takes to really make something of yourself." Amanda added her perspective with the casual cruelty of youth. "It is kind of sad, really. She is obviously intelligent, but she just cannot figure out how to turn that into actual money. Some people are just not good with practical things." Then came the final blow, delivered by Gloria, with the confidence of someone who believed she was sharing obvious truth. "Face it, she will always be a worthless nobody. Some people are born to struggle, and Denise is one of them. She will probably be living paycheck to paycheck for the rest of her life." The sound of glasses clinking together in agreement was like a physical slap. They were toasting to my failure, celebrating their own perceived superiority, while completely oblivious to the fact that I was the foundation holding up their entire financial lives. My hands started shaking as the full weight of their betrayal hit me. These were the people I loved most in the world, the people I had been sacrificing my own comfort to help, and they saw me as nothing more than a cautionary tale about what happens when someone lacks ambition and drive. They pitied me while I was literally paying their bills, condescended to me while I was the reason they could sleep peacefully at night without worrying about eviction or repossession. I quietly left the house without saying goodbye, and it took them 30 minutes to realize I was gone. During the drive home, my mind was racing with calculations. I knew exactly how much money I had given each of them down to the penny. I knew how precarious their financial situations really were, and I knew that without my anonymous support, their comfortable lives would collapse within weeks. That night, I sat at my computer and pulled up all my bank statements, reviewing months of payments that had kept my family afloat while they mocked me for being a failure. I researched the cancellation procedures for automatic payments and calculated exactly how long it would take for each family member to feel the consequences. The plan that formed in my mind was elegantly simple. If they wanted to see worthless, I would show them exactly what worthless looked like. On December 1st, I canceled every single automatic payment I had set up for my family members. There were no warnings, no explanations, no dramatic confrontations. I simply removed my financial support as quietly as I had provided it, and then I waited to see how long it would take them to notice that their mysterious safety nets had disappeared. The first 2 weeks of December passed peacefully. My family continued their normal routines, unaware that the financial foundation of their lives had just been pulled out from under them. They had no reason to suspect anything because bills typically arrive at the end of the month and their next payment due dates had not arrived yet. During this time, I went completely quiet on all family communications, not responding to texts or calls with my usual promptness. By December 15th, reality started to hit. My mother received an eviction notice for unpaid rent the first time in months that her landlord had not received the mysterious church donation. She called me in a panic, but I let it go to voicemail. Tommy and Sarah's electricity was shut off during a particularly cold snap, leaving them and their 2 young children without heat. The utility company was no longer receiving those anonymous payments from the fake government program. Gloria discovered her car was being repossessed when she came out of the salon where she worked to find a tow truck hooking it up. The loan company had not received a payment from her phantom benefactor, and her own credit was too poor to qualify for any kind of extension. Pete got a foreclosure warning on his auto shop when the mysterious investor failed to make the monthly loan payment that had been keeping his business afloat. Amanda started receiving threatening calls about her defaulted student loans when the scholarship office could not explain why her payments had suddenly stopped. Each family member was experiencing their own individual crisis, but none of them connected these events to each other because they had never been honest about their financial struggles. By January 1st, the panic was spreading through the family like wildfire. They started calling each other desperately, trying to understand how all their financial help could have disappeared simultaneously. For the first time in years, they were forced to be completely honest about their money problems because they needed each other's help to figure out what was happening. Gloria called an emergency family meeting at Pete's auto shop, the only place they could gather without risking eviction or disconnected utilities. As they shared their individual disasters, a dawning realization began to emerge. All of their mysterious financial assistance had stopped at exactly the same time. They started to wonder if there was a connection, but still no one suspected me because they were so convinced that I was the poorest among them. That was when the desperate phone calls to me began. My mother called first, her voice shaking with fear and confusion. "Honey, I am in real trouble here. Do you know anyone who might be able to help with a loan? I am facing eviction and I do not know where to turn." My response was carefully measured. "Mom, I am just a worthless nobody. Remember, what could someone like me possibly do to help?" Tommy called next, his voice tight with stress. "Denise, I know you do not have much, but do you know anyone who might be hiring? Sarah and I are desperate and we have got kids to think about." "Tommy," I said calmly, "why would a struggling failure like me know anyone with good job opportunities? You should probably ask someone successful." Gloria's call came with her usual commanding tone, but I could hear the desperation underneath. "Denise, family needs to stick together during times like this. We all need to help each other, however we can." "That is interesting, Gloria," I replied. I thought worthless people could not help successful families like ours. At least, that was the impression I got at Thanksgiving. Amanda sent a text message asking if any of my friends might be hiring, and I responded, "My friends are all failures like me, according to what I heard. You probably do not want their help." By this point, my family was starting to realize that I knew something about their situation, but they could not figure out what it could be. They began to suspect that I had overheard their conversation at Thanksgiving, but they still could not imagine that I had any real power to help them because of their fixed assumptions about my financial status. Finally, they decided to confront me directly. The entire family showed up at my studio apartment on a Saturday morning looking desperate and confused. When I opened the door, I could see the fear in their eyes. They knew their comfortable lives were crumbling, but they had no idea why. "Denise," my mother began carefully, "we think you might have overheard us talking at Thanksgiving, and we want to apologize if our words hurt your feelings. But right now, we really need to focus on figuring out what happened to all of our financial assistance." That was the moment I had been waiting for. I invited them into my small apartment and calmly pulled out a folder full of bank statements, printed emails, and payment confirmations. I laid them out on my coffee table like evidence in a courtroom case. "You want to know what happened to your financial assistance?" I asked quietly. "It was withdrawn by a worthless nobody who got tired of being treated like one." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched their faces as they processed the bank statements showing months of payments to their landlords, utility companies, loan services, and creditors. I showed them the fake accounts I had created, the elaborate cover stories I had maintained, and the thousands of dollars I had been providing each month while they pitied me for my supposed poverty. "This is impossible," Gloria whispered, staring at the evidence. "You do not have this kind of money. You drive an old car and shop at thrift stores." "I drive an old car and shop at thrift stores because I chose to prioritize helping my family over impressing them," I explained. "I make $90,000 a year as a software developer, but I have been living on $40,000, so I could give the rest to all of you." The shock on their faces was complete. Tommy started crying as he realized that his sister, the one he had pitied for months, was the reason his children had heat and electricity. Amanda covered her mouth in horror as she understood that her struggling cousin had been paying her student loans while she mocked her lifestyle choices. But it was my mother's reaction that affected me the most. She looked at the evidence, then at me, and I could see the full weight of her betrayal sinking in. Her daughter had been secretly supporting the entire family while she participated in conversations about that same daughter being a worthless failure. "Denise," she whispered, "we had no idea. We thought you were struggling. We never meant to hurt you." "You thought I was struggling," I said quietly, "and instead of offering to help me, you mocked me behind my back. You celebrated my supposed failures while I was literally keeping your lives together. That tells me everything I need to know about what I really mean to this family." The immediate aftermath of my revelation was chaotic and painful for everyone involved. Some family members were genuinely horrified by their behavior and immediately began apologizing, while others seemed more concerned about getting their financial support restored than addressing the emotional damage they had caused. My mother was the first to write me a detailed apology letter, acknowledging that she had failed me as a parent by not recognizing my success and by participating in conversations that diminished my worth. She admitted that she had been so focused on my lifestyle choices that she never considered the possibility that I was choosing to live simply rather than being forced to by circumstances. Tommy and Sarah both came to my apartment separately to apologize in person. Tommy broke down completely, admitting that he had felt guilty about his own unemployment, but had found comfort in believing that at least he was doing better than his sister. The realization that I had been supporting his family while he pitied me was almost more than he could handle. Amanda wrote a long email explaining how the family culture had influenced her perceptions and how she had never questioned the narrative about my supposed struggles. She was horrified to realize that her educational success was only possible because of my secret support, and she committed to changing her attitude completely. Pete surprised me by taking full responsibility for his failure to defend me during family conversations. He admitted that he had often heard family members making dismissive comments about my life choices and had never spoken up because he assumed their assessments were accurate. But Gloria was a different story entirely. Her initial reaction was anger rather than remorse. She seemed furious that I had tricked her by not revealing my true financial situation, as if I had somehow been dishonest by helping her anonymously. She refused to acknowledge that her comments at Thanksgiving were cruel and inappropriate, instead focusing on how unfair it was for me to withdraw support without warning. I decided to implement a system of selective forgiveness based on who had genuinely recognized their mistakes and committed to changing their behavior. My mother continued to receive rent assistance, but at a reduced amount that required her to contribute more from her own income. Tommy got partial utility help, but only if he could prove he was actively searching for employment and taking steps to improve his family's financial independence. Amanda received continued student loan assistance, but she had to provide monthly progress reports on her job search and career development. Pete got business support after demonstrating that he understood why his previous attitude had been hurtful and committing to treat me as an equal rather than someone to be pitied. Gloria, however, received nothing. Her refusal to acknowledge her cruelty and her sense of entitlement to my money meant that she would have to face the full consequences of her financial irresponsibility. This was not an easy decision for me, but I realized that continuing to enable someone who showed no remorse would only perpetuate the cycle of disrespect. For the first time in our family's history, we began having honest conversations about money and success. I revealed my actual salary and career achievements, shocking everyone with the extent of my professional accomplishments. They had been so focused on my modest lifestyle that they never considered the possibility that I might be highly successful in my field. The family dynamics transformation was profound but gradual. My relatives began to understand that their assumptions about financial success were deeply flawed. They had equated visible spending with prosperity and modest living with failure, never considering that true financial wisdom might involve living below your means and prioritizing security over appearances. 6 months after my revelation, the long-term consequences of my decision were becoming clear. Gloria had eventually lost her apartment and was forced to move in with Pete, a living situation that strained their relationship because she had never learned the humility that comes with genuine struggle. Her refusal to apologize or acknowledge her mistakes had cost her not just my financial support, but also the respect of other family members who began to see her behavior more clearly. Tommy, motivated by the fear of losing my help, again found a steady job in construction and began developing real budgeting skills for the first time in his adult life. My mother started taking evening classes in bookkeeping, determined to become more financially literate and independent. Amanda graduated successfully and secured a good entry-level position in her field, finally understanding the connection between hard work and financial stability. Pete's auto shop began to stabilize as he implemented better business practices and learned to manage his finances more effectively. The experience had taught him valuable lessons about pride assumptions and the importance of treating all people with respect, regardless of their apparent circumstances. Most importantly, our family gatherings became genuine celebrations where I was included as a respected and valued member rather than someone to be pitied. The conversations changed from subtle condescension to authentic interest in my work and opinions. For the first time in years, family members began offering to help me with things, recognizing that support should flow in multiple directions rather than being a one-way street. My career also benefited from this experience in unexpected ways. I used my newfound confidence to pursue opportunities in financial planning and consulting, helping other families navigate the complex emotional dynamics around money and success. My story became a powerful example of how assumptions can damage relationships and how honest communication is essential for healthy family functioning. 1 year after the Thanksgiving confrontation, Gloria finally reached out to apologize. Facing genuine homelessness had forced her to confront her own pride and acknowledge the harm her words had caused. The process of rebuilding our relationship was slow and careful, but it was based on honesty rather than the false assumptions that had characterized our previous interactions. I learned that there is a crucial difference between helping people and enabling them to avoid consequences for their choices. For years, I had confused financial support with love, thinking that my worth to the family was measured by how much I could provide rather than who I was as a person. The experience taught me that real love requires mutual respect and recognition of each person's inherent value. The most important lesson was about the danger of assumptions in close relationships. My family had created an entire narrative about my life without ever asking direct questions or having honest conversations about our individual situations. They assumed that my modest lifestyle reflected financial struggle rather than conscious choice, and I had allowed those assumptions to persist because I wanted to help them without damaging their pride. Today, our family operates on a foundation of transparency and mutual respect that was forged through crisis but has created stronger relationships than we ever had before. We have learned to celebrate each other's successes honestly and offer support that acknowledges rather than diminishes individual dignity and capability. They called me worthless because they confused humble with helpless. Now they know the difference between someone who chooses to live simply and someone who has to. Sometimes the greatest power is showing people exactly how much they depend on the person they take for granted. Have you ever been underestimated by people who should have known better? What would you do if your family mocked your lifestyle while you were secretly supporting them? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and do not forget to hit that like button if this story reminded you that appearances can be deceiving and that respect should be earned through character rather than material displays. Subscribe for more stories about family dynamics, financial boundaries, and the courage it takes to demand the respect you deserve. Please share this video with anyone who needs to hear that their worth is not determined by how others perceive their lifestyle choices. Remember, the people who truly love you will celebrate your success rather than diminish it, and sometimes teaching others your value requires showing them life without your contributions. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it inspires you to never let anyone make you feel worthless, especially when you know your true worth.